Welcome to the Art and Science of Complex Sales, proudly presented by Membrain. This podcast is your gateway to mastering the craft of modern selling. If you're passionate about growth, impact, and unlocking full potential in sales and revenue, you're in the right place. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And now let's get started with today's guest. I love hearing stories about lives lived and lessons learned, and how those lessons are making a real-world impact in the world of sales. Eric Larocque has had a great journey, from an 11-year-old working at the counter at his dad's butcher shop, to playing semi-pro hockey, to starting as an SDR, and then eventually building sales teams at scale. He's packed a lot into his career. Today, we're talking grit, perseverance, empathy, drive, systems, coaching, and more. And he talks about his passion for building sales teams, coaching sales, and helping lift performance at scale. So today, let's dive in with Eric Larocque, CEO of Cultivate Winning. Hey, Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. Appreciate you making some time for me today, and I'm excited to be here.
Heck yeah. No, truth be told, I found, I loved a lot of the content you were posting on LinkedIn, and it really hit home to me. And I was like, man, that's a guy I got to have on. So reached out, did some outbound LinkedIn prospecting and found you. And I love your story. So that's where I was hoping to start is just, do you mind just telling us a little bit about your background in sales?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start at the beginning. I think my first sort of like real venture into sales and what that was all about was working in my dad's butcher shop when I was 11 years old. So I made a couple of posts about it on LinkedIn, but essentially, even at 11 years old, I was very good with like pattern recognition. And, I would notice, because I was typically at the front till, I would notice that, people were continuously sort of buying the same items. Most people were buying the same items, kind of grouping them together. So I told my dad, like, hey, do you think about, making this like a package that people can just buy? And then he's like, yeah, actually, that's not a bad idea, because typically he was just kind of like a hard ass on me. So he's like, wait a minute, this guy has actually a good idea for me. So he started doing that, and it started doing really well. So that was kind of like where my mind started wrapping around, pattern recognitions and creating value behind things. And I worked with him till I was about 17 years old, and then I went off to school in Ottawa, and I went to school for marketing. But even before that, sales wasn't sort of the end goal, right? I was a competitive athlete, was a competitive hockey player. When I was 13, I was playing midget AAA, and 14, and then when I was 15 and 16, I was getting drafted, and I was getting looked from scouts, especially for the QMJHL, which at that point was Gatineau. I think it's called Hall these days, or it was Hall back then. I think it's Gatineau now. And the training camps and getting ready for that and prepping for that league, I blew out my knee, MCL and ACL, and that was really tough. So that wasn't a setback yet. I went back to junior, played a bunch there, trying to get my way back up. And just I was on the cusp of getting to that same level, I injured myself again. And it was another knee issue at that point, which pretty much, at that point I was almost an overager. I was 20, and it pretty much derailed, I guess, my hopes and ambitions of being a professional hockey player. But so I ended up going to school. Like I said, I ended up taking marketing in Ottawa. And that was great. I really enjoyed it. But, I wasn't given anything when I was young. I had to work for everything. So to make extra money when I was in school and to pay bills and to go out and partying and drinking money with my friends, I needed a second job. So I needed a part-time job somehow. So I had a couple of buddies who were doing vacuum sales back then. And it wasn't sort of the traditional, typical door-to-door sale. It was, I think if I remember correctly, it was something along the lines of they won a trip and they got a discount towards that trip. But the pitch was that we had to come in with these vacuums, and they had to listen to our pitch, and then they'd get like a scratch-off ticket, and they would tell them how much of a discount they would get. So it was somewhat of a warm lead. And then we were just trying to close those deals, and the product itself was actually quite incredible, and it did pretty well. So we started selling, 2 or 3 of them a month, and back then we were making about between $600 and $700 per vacuum. So
That's
on
a
some
nice
months,
commission. That's a nice commission on a vacuum there. That's
that's like, you
fantastic.
know, I don't want to date myself, but that was like 22 years ago now. So
Yeah.
back then, you know, we were kind of like just rolling in it. And we were loving
Yeah.
it. So, you know, that kind of started getting my wheels spinning again on like, hey, you know, I'm in marketing. I really enjoy the creative side of it. The creative part of my brain really enjoyed that. But I'm like, you know, looking at it financially, and sales might be more lucrative, and it might be, you know, it kind of scratched that competitive itch that I had that I couldn't really put away. I was still playing a lot of like competitive sort of like co-ed leagues and
Hmm.
intramural sports and stuff like that, and college hockey and stuff like that. But it wasn't the same, right? And I needed to sort of get that competitive itch out of me. So sales kind of did that for me, especially when I first started. So you know, long story short, I ended up finishing school, and then I ended up moving into, I had decided to go into sales. So I ended up moving into the recruiting world in Ottawa. It's quite big back there. And essentially it was a lead gen role, which, you know, these days we would call it an SDR role.
Yep.
And, you know, my responsibilities was just, you know, 80 to 120 cold calls a day. We didn't have, you know, sequencers or, you know, call platforms back then. So we're just like
Mhm.
hammering the yellow pages, really. That's phone books for people that don't understand that reference. Um, and then, yeah, I was just doing that. I loved it. I was selling into the federal government. I had a couple of my uncles that actually worked in a few different departments, so I had a little bit of a network there, and they were able to sort of get the ball rolling for me, and I ended up doing quite well. And I did that for a couple of years, and then I ended up moving into a sort of traditional AE role, which I obviously enjoyed a lot more because I was more, you know, part of the actual closing of the deals, making a lot more commission, a lot more exciting, in my opinion, back then. Ended up staying in that industry for about 5 years.
Mhm.
I ended up having a friend that worked within the foreign exchange world. And he was like, hey, we're looking for some salespeople, BDRs especially. Are you interested? And I was like, listen, I don't know anything about financial markets or
Is
foreign.
that current, like currency exchange type stuff?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So our main responsibilities essentially was developing that business, prospecting, and trying to steal that business from the traditional banks.
Okay.
And we had that was with Western Union, and we were able to be a lot more cutthroat and um, be a lot more aggressive with our rates. So we would try to undercut the banks and build those relationships, and then move those clients into hedging options, and that's where we were able to make a lot more, you know, better money on spreads and things like that. So I
Wow.
ended up doing that for a while as well and really enjoying it. And that was, I guess, my first sort of like introduction into like a really healthy team culture. And not knocking recruiting, it might have changed, but back then it was super cutthroat.
Hmm.
Even within our own office, it was like, you know, if you even like called somebody that somebody else called, like you were getting, you know, reamed at and screamed at. So on this side of it, it was just a really healthy culture. It was a bunch of people that really enjoyed each other. We were all friends inside, outside work. And I think that really like sort of started forming my sales philosophy and the methodologies that I use these days, which is very much like people focused and team focused. So I love that. I really love that job. And then I started dating a girl back in Ottawa that we started getting serious, and she was doing her master's in psychology at that time, and ended up getting accepted for her PhD at UBC in Kelowna, which is where I live these days. So unfortunately, I kind of had, you know, a decision to make. I had a sort of a fork in the road. Do I stay here and sort of end that relationship, or do I leave this job that I really love and follow, you know, this girl that I was really into? So I ended up obviously picking the girl, which I think
Picking the
we
lot.
all
Yeah.
do right back then.
Yeah.
We were young. Um, but I ended up telling my boss at the time that I was going to leave. You know, I love this place. Don't want to leave, but this is sort of my notice. You know, this really sucks, but it is what it is. Um, it ended up really working really well because actually they were already sort of talking about BC expansions at that time because the Vancouver branch was doing really well, and they're like, "Do you want to do your own thing in Kelowna and sort of kickstart that branch and get that going?" And I was like, "Heck yeah, this is like the best of both worlds." I mean, I lose
Yeah.
the team that I really love, but I still get to stay in that industry, which I grew to really like. And, you know, I still have, you know, those friends to sort of bounce ideas off of and still have that network, right? So
Hmm.
ended up doing that, which went really well for a little while. And then they ended up restructuring sort of the organization a little bit and moving that branch down to the coast, which at that point I decided just not to pursue anymore. And that sort of led me into SaaS and my first intro into sort of the tech world, which was great, which was working for Banana Tag. At that
Mm-hmm.
point, that was a maternity contract. The director of sales, the lady that was director of sales, was going on maternity leave, 12 to 14 months. They needed someone to sort of bridge that gap. Fractional didn't really exist back then, so it was mostly just contract work, right? So I ended up doing really well at those interviews and getting an opportunity to move into a director role for the first time in my career. And before that, with the last couple of years at Western Union, I was in the sales management position. So I had a little bit of experience there as well, managing a team. And that was great. Really loved that role. Stayed there until end of contract. And then I was sort of at another fork in the road at that point, which was I really love this managing people, and I'm starting to really find myself in finding fulfillment in others. But very similarly to when I first got into sales, I had that itch again, that competitive itch of like, hey, like I really actually like selling and closing and
Yeah.
prospecting and chasing. Like I'm a hunter at heart.
Yeah.
That's what I really love doing is hunting. So I was like, this is a good opportunity to sort of see if A, like I still like that, and B, if I want to keep going down that route or do I want to stay within management. So I ended up going to a web development agency called Cheeky Monkey based in Kelowna. And essentially they were a Drupal shop, which is,
Yeah.
a language that not a lot of people can do. So we had a
Mm-hmm.
pretty distinctive advantage there. And I did struggle a little bit at first because Drupal sites are quite expensive to build. And I was chasing essentially SMBs, trying to get them to either upgrade their website, build a new website, fix their SEO. We had a couple of different levers we could pull in. It's kind of spinning my wheels a little bit for the first month or two until I started just prospecting and hunting. And I started talking to some big marketing agencies in Vancouver and Calgary. And those discussions essentially led to the point of them asking, like, we don't really need this for ourselves, but hey, we have a lot of projects that are Drupal based that we
Mm-hmm.
need help on. Are you guys doing that? And at that time, we weren't really doing that. So I was like, actually, I'm not really sure. We find out, talk to my CTO, CEO, and we're like, yeah, actually, let's venture down this road and see what that comes out of it. Um, so we ended up doing that, and that actually ended up, doing really well and sort of blowing up. And we got a couple of really big name agencies behind us. So then when I was prospecting and talking to other agencies across Canada, we had some really good credibility, and it was, it was not easy, but it was going really well.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing that for a while, and ended up almost doing too well, honestly, in my opinion, because after my first year there, they wanted to cap my commissions,
Oh.
unfortunately, which
Oh.
was like, a tough pill to swallow because, money isn't everything, but I'm definitely money motivated. I think I wouldn't be in sales if I wasn't. So at that point, I decided that I was going to look for something else. And I kind of wanted to move back into management, honestly, at that point, because I kind of missed the whole team building aspect. I was kind of a lone wolf there a little bit. So I ended up sort of coming across Big Steel Box, where I worked there for quite a while, almost 8 years. Um, and they didn't really have any management positions at the time. They were, that industry was just starting to boom, which is like
Mm-hmm.
containers and, people using containers to move and store their stuff and buying them. And that was just booming. And I'm like, look, this is an industry that I think is going to do really well. So I want to get involved in this in some capacity. So they had an entry level inside sales job on Indeed. I applied to just to sort of get a feel of the land and get to see the people that work there and the management and see what that's all about. And ended up going to an interview, and it just wasn't for me. Just that role itself, I felt maybe ego a little bit was sort of below me at that point, and I was just like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to restart over again. So I ended up just like telling them on the spot, hey guys, appreciate it. You guys are awesome. But this isn't just not for me. I'm not really interested in this. So I'm just going to pass. And then as I'm driving home, right after the interview, Lonnie, who was the director of sales there, ends up giving me a call. And he's like, listen, we don't have anyone with like your skill set here. We are, we're booming and we're really growing and we need people with that skill set with us. He was like, give me 6 months I promise you I'll do everything I can to sort of find you another role or to create something for you. And after 6 months, if it doesn't work out, no hard feelings. We'll go, our own way, and I'll be happy to give you a referral and try to
Mm-hmm.
help you out with my network. And I was like, you know what? I had saved up, some money back then, and I had a good little nest egg. So I was like, I might as well just take a gamble and see what this goes. So I ended up doing it, which was great. But after 2 weeks, essentially, he was like, listen, I got something else for you. So he was able to talk to the CEO and then find me into essentially what, I started off the sales coaching role there. And that
Oh,
gave me an
that's
opportunity
sweet.
to build it and to create the scripts and to create the actual framework behind it.
Yeah.
The technology behind it. We weren't even really listening to calls back then. So we got that going, the templates, and just the entire coaching framework, which again is pretty much a lot of what I do these days is helping leaders create better coaching infrastructure and coaching playbooks and frameworks. So that was great. Really love that. Was able to really have a good impact on close rate and conversion rates and employee morale. And, employees really loved having sort of an unbiased sort of, third party to
Yeah.
chat with and to
It's
talk about
huge.
their strengths, their pros and cons, and, the crappy things that are happening in their life and just get it all out. It was, somewhat of a therapist role almost back then. So I did that for a while until the head of sales was he ended up finding a COO job in the Lower Mainland in Vancouver, and he needed somebody to step into that role. So I ended up winning that opportunity and winning that job, and I was there for in that role for about 6.5 years.
Wow.
And again, that was where I was able to make a lot of traction and really find myself and find my system and philosophies. And I was able to triple the revenue in our team, starting at 9 million. And after I left, we were just over 27 million for my team. We were able to double conversion rates from 17 to over 38%. Implemented Salesforce. We implemented Salesloft, so follow-up automations and sequences, which also had a big increase on conversion and close rates. When I first started, the role itself was sort of like a inside sales, outside sales, customer service, customer success, blended into one, right? The calls just came into one number, and whoever was answering it just handled everything. So I ended up splitting and isolating all those roles, and then creating a phone menu and making sure that everything routes properly. And that had a pretty big increase as well. And that also allowed us to be able to find the right people for the right seats and not just
Mm-hmm.
somebody that was bouncing back and forth, because the biggest complaint back then was time management, stress tolerance. It's really hard to go from selling to from hunting to farming to back to inside sales.
Yep.
So that had a big impact on employee morale as well, and conversion rates. And a couple of other things like, I'm very heavily obsessed with self-development. So I created, self-development playbooks and frameworks where everyone was getting coached at least once a week. And we had, monthly sales meetings and monthly self-development opportunities, like, reading books and talking about it and sharing what they learned, and brainstorming sessions and peer sort of led coaching sessions as well. So all that just, at the end of the day, had a big impact on scaling and the bottom line. So that was awesome. And then sort of towards the end there, again, I started, I have a couple of coach and sales mentors that I work with, and I lean heavily on, what's next for me. I've been in this role for 6.5 years. There's not really much, there's not a bigger ceiling for me here. What's the next step, right? And a lot of them were saying like, hey, listen, there's a lot of things that you're doing there that I think could be helpful to other companies, because a couple of them were actual just hands-on sales coaches and training sales. So they had a pretty good, feel of what was lacking out there. So that sort of led me to going out on my own, which I did as of last March. So March 2025. I've been doing it now for about, I guess, 10 months now.
Yeah.
And it was really great. I was able to get a couple of big contracts pretty early on that, I kind of coasted on a little bit until, I'd say, approximately October. And then in October, I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to do this LinkedIn thing, apply myself to really learning this platform, because before then I posted, here and there, but it was maybe once every 3 months. And
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't consistent with it at all, and I wasn't really trying to build my brand. And so I decided to take it seriously, and I wanted to essentially, my goal was to build my brand, build my voice and my authority. And I just wanted to share essentially stories of what I've been through with others. And that's kind of my whole philosophy on LinkedIn is I mostly just share stories of what I've been through. Things like I like to hire, servers and
Mm-hmm.
ex-athletes and, things like I fired my top performer at one point and how that was, how that felt going through it and some of the, some of the feedback afterwards and how it snowballed into actually being a really positive thing. And so it's been really great, and I'm getting a really positive response on it all, and it's been really fun. And really, as of January 1st here this year, things have been really snowballing and getting
That's
busier and
awesome.
busier, which is great. It pretty much brings us to
To today. Well,
yeah,
and I appreciate you giving that overview. And
yeah,
I took a lot of notes here. I want to ask. I have some questions about it, just through all stages of your journey. Because
of course.
thanks for sharing so much about that. And um, let's start at the beginning. Well, not necessarily the beginning, but let's start at that the hockey playing, and
Yeah.
tell me some of the lessons you learned from athletics and that mentality and performing that level that you bring forward to today
Yeah, a
for
couple of
sales
them for
experts.
sure. Yeah, a couple of them for sure. I would say the biggest two are definitely preparation. Right. Back then we were practicing every single day. Sometimes 2 days. We'd practice in the morning or we'd have off ice conditioning in the morning and we'd be on the ice at night or vice versa. So we were always practicing. And then when I first got into sales, I was hmm, like no one's really practicing. Like they're
Mhm.
showing up, they're doing their job and successfully, some of them. And then they were just sort of shutting it down after work. And for me, like I'm a big believer in like I really enjoy mastery of things, like mastering my craft. Once I get really good at something, I kind of lose interest in it. I'm like, this is kind of boring now. For me, the part like it's like that saying, right? Enjoying the journey. I really love like getting from like the bottom of something and getting really good at it. That's what I enjoy. So with sales, it's like there is no ceiling. Like
Yeah.
it's this you can always get better, right? So that was very attractive to me. And right away, I was able to really like dive deep into it. And I was reading a lot of books and I was listening to like audiobooks and I was picking people's brains and I'd be role playing with my, ex-girlfriend at the time or just with myself in the car all the time. Sort of like working on the pitch. Right. So I think preparation these days, especially I still talk about this a lot. And every time I go in and I help some of my clients, I notice it right away. There's just a lack of preparation, a lack of wanting to master that craft and maybe almost a little bit even the pride in that craft, right? And wanting to be the best, which again is that competitive side of it. And then the other one that was a big one is just resiliency and not giving up, right? Like I had a lot of setbacks, and anybody who's played sports has had setbacks, right? Even the greats have had setbacks. So going through those setbacks and just like not giving up, and there's a lot of times before I got to those higher end teams, I was cut all the time. I was making teams, and I was like, "What the hell, Dad?" Like I was always crushed when I was like really young. And he was just like he instilled a really good work ethic into me. But he's just like the one thing you don't do is quit, right? No matter what. You're never going to be a loser if you don't quit. So you're only a loser once you quit. So that's sort of always stuck with me. And if there's one thing I'm not is a loser. So um, that is a big thing as well. And when I managed my own teams or when I go in and I'm helping some of the teams that I'm working with now, that's what I tell them all the time is the biggest thing you can do is just have that resilience. You're going to hear no like 100 times, right? Like no matter what,
Yeah.
you could be the best salesperson in the world and you're still going to get no's all the time. So it's just like not letting those affect you on a personal and professional level on a day-to-day basis, sort of detaching yourself from that outcome, enjoying mastering that craft and enjoying that journey of just becoming a better salesperson. And if you keep doing that repeatedly over a long period of time, you are going to get really good and you're going to make a lot of money and you're going to have fine advancements in your career. So those are probably the two biggest things that I found from sports and the team sort of atmosphere and environment and going to war with like the people you're with and not only celebrating your own successes, but celebrating the success of the person next to you, I
Mhm.
think goes a long way in the healthiest and best teams that I've been part of. that was the sort of, the focal point, was that people were celebrating everybody. We weren't hiding things from each other. We were celebrating when somebody else got a deal. If somebody, had a better pitch or had a better way of closing, or maybe a pain question or something like that, they would share it with the group. And they're like, guys, this is working really well for me. You should try this as well. So I think, that's kind of the main three sort of things I took out of sports. And I still talk about these things every day. So.
Right. Well, tell me, so that Western Union time too, you mentioned something there that really stood out to me when you mentioned it, was that team culture.
Yeah.
Right. So what does that look like in terms of what did it look like in terms of that time together? But how is that translated as well in terms of how you build and lead teams today?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just what I touched upon. Like, that's where I first started seeing people like cheer for each other and celebrate those wins together and be happy for somebody else that was closing a big deal. In that recruiting world back then, it was pretty cutthroat, like I said, and we didn't really have that same camaraderie at all. And if somebody was doing well, there was almost like people were almost resentful a little bit about you doing well. They're like, oh, what's he doing that I'm not doing? As opposed to coming and asking and learning from each other. It was like, oh, he must be doing something, something like shady or something. I'm like, the heck? So when I got to Western Union and everyone was like celebrating each other's wins and they were hanging out after work and they were going and having beers together or playing sports, I was like, holy crap, like this is like way more in line with like, my sporting days. And I'm like, this is really fun. It went from just sales being like that itch I needed to get out of me and that competitive stuff to like, wow, this is actually fun. And I'm actually looking forward to going and seeing my team and my guys and, and girls and yeah, as sometimes we just like, it was a little bit different back then, but during lunchtime, we'd have like a PS2 or something and we would just play PS2. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like,
it's all, yeah.
You know what I mean? So like that really just changed that whole mind frame, and it kind of flipped the way of how I thought about sales teams, which was cutthroat. You're your own sort of man, lone wolf. You got to do what you got to do, to more of like, hey, let's actually be collaborative. Let's learn from each other and let's help each other all win, because, the low tide raises all ships. So, yeah, I really love that. And to this day, it's sort of changed my entire sales sort of philosophy and methodology and how I think about it. And the first thing that I do when I work with teams these days is I try to fix the people that we have. Like, oftentimes I'm brought in because the team isn't doing well, right? My sales team's broken. We're missing quota. I don't think I have the right people in the right seats. And it's like pump the brakes a little bit. I don't think that's actually the problem. I think it's either the systems that aren't supporting the people properly, or they're not being coached, or you're not sort of delivering your message to them the proper way, or things like that, right? That team atmosphere is lacking. So they're sort of down on, they're defeated. Instead of, as sales is a profession of momentum. You need to have confidence and momentum. And once that's going, you're able to really find yourself in that flow state, detach yourself from that outcome. And that's when success really comes. So that all sort of led into what I do today on pretty much a daily basis. And it's what I talk about probably the most often.
Well, it's we have a similar journey in that regards. When I was joined a startup software company as an SDR, and I thought I hated sales at that point, because I spent most of my time protecting leads and telling people they couldn't do this, that, or the other, and being called into the CFO's office because, my reps were trying to cheat the company, which they weren't, it just getting thrown under the bus and fighting battles. I'm like, sales sucks. I hated it. I was like, I'm going to give it one more shot. So I gave it one more shot, and I ended up going to a company where, man, the team was built. They was built well. We became just great friends. They're all my friends to this day. We there was a foosball table in the break room, and every lunch it was just that's what we do. We play foosball, but it wasn't like you're slacking off. It's like, no, you're building culture.
Oh yeah,
and we had our it's just amazing, right? So
we had that foosball table as well, and we'd actually go and change into our gym clothing for it because it gets so
heated.
Yeah, 100%. So I can totally feel you on that one.
Well, let's dive into this. I have one A couple more questions. You mentioned a term here, resiliency, that I want to dive into because it's also something that I really appreciated. It's actually the post that I found you on in terms of LinkedIn, and since I've been reading all your stuff, but you were talking about the resiliency factor in salespeople and like where we find it and how we find it and how we bring it out. And you made the argument that, you know, a lot of times that let's go look for people that aren't necessarily, you know, the born and bred salespeople. Let's go look for, you know, servers, athletes, the others that if we're going to fill our sales ranks, maybe we just perseverance and resiliency are critical.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit more about that philosophy because I really connect with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a preconceived notion in sales, and maybe not as much these days, but back when I started, for sure, that you needed to be very extroverted and a great speaker and like super charismatic. And if you didn't have those traits and innate traits within you, you weren't going to do well. Which I just think is bullshit, to be honest with you, because what I see is that people that are empathetic and curious and resilient and have grit are the people that truly win, and they do a much better job of taking care of those customers, and they're not burning bridges, and they're providing a world-class customer experience. So for me, when I first started at Big Steel Box, especially, um, I was sort of told like, hey, we got to find people that are experienced a little bit later, maybe in their career, because we don't want turnover. We'd rather just have a safe option that are going to be here and maybe deliver at 70, 75%, but they're here for the long run, and it's going to be easier for you to manage. And that just didn't really sit right with me. I didn't do that at all. I kind of
Mm-hmm.
did the complete opposite. I would much rather have high risk, high reward. That's always sort of been my hiring philosophy. So I just started hiring people with no experience. And I just started sort of like headhunting and poaching them on LinkedIn. That was my main strategy, really. Is I talk about it often, but I don't really post jobs on Indeed because you're just playing a lottery at that point. And you're hoping for the best. And oftentimes the people that are just spamming their resumes on Indeed aren't really people that you want to have really within your sales team, anyways. So
Mm-hmm.
what I started doing is I started looking for ex-athletes, people that have been in sporting teams or maybe college athletics, or servers especially, and that started working really well. Because in my experience, the servers that I was talking to and speaking to were looking for sort of like the next step, right? They really love their job, but they often wanted to maybe move to a more corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
They really liked the idea of sales, but they didn't think they could do it because they didn't have the experience. So when I reached out, I was like, "Hey, listen, I really love like your profile. I really think you'd be really successful in this role, and I've had people with your profile really excel. Are you interested in maybe meeting me for an interview and maybe chatting about it?" And they were like, heck yeah. And that went really well. And I was getting a lot of interest. And a lot of the top
Mm-hmm.
performers that I brought in were all from that background. Some people from construction, which, they had shitty knees and a bad back, and they were just like laboring every day, but they wanted something more, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they'd show up every single day, and they were putting in 12-hour shifts with a bad back, and they weren't complaining. And I'm like, wow, if they can do that, you can do sales. You know what I mean? Like I can teach you the sales technique, but I can't teach you to show up every single day
Yeah.
and just put in the work. And in my previous experiences, I'd noticed somebody in sales that might miss quota for a couple months and they quit, and I'm like, what is going on? Why are they quitting so early? Or they'd be like, this isn't for me, or this product sucks, or this pricing model sucks. I'm going somewhere else, and they just job hop and they look for another job. And I was just like, this makes no sense. So I was kind of like, a little bit burned back from that back then, from that experience, that I was like, I want to avoid that, because for me, managing, I wanted to spend most of my time coaching, and I didn't want to spend most of my time just putting fires out and having to consistently hire and do fixed turnover. So I ended up looking for the people that I thought gave me the best opportunity to build skills within them that would stay with us, that had worked, servers or construction people or ex-athletes or bartenders or whatever. It's all team environments as well, and they all depend on each other, and they need to work within a team or it doesn't work, right? So they all had those skills that I was looking for: growth mindsets, curiosity, empathy, integrity, grit, resilience. So I just made sense, and essentially we implemented a tool called People Best, which is essentially just an assessment platform. And
Mm-hmm.
from that platform, it just gave us a ton of data points. And from those data scores, I would feed that into essentially what I call my own grit scale, which was a combination of about 5 or 6 of those traits that I mentioned. And then, if they were above 60% on that, I'm like, okay, they're going to be really good. If they were like above 80%, and I have 5 years of data going back, like 99% of the time, if they were over 80%, they were some of the best salespeople I've ever seen. So I had a pretty like predictable model to bring people in. And to this day now, when I work with new clients, it's what I'm putting into their companies. I'm putting this model in. And
Nice.
essentially, you benchmark your top players, you find what drives them, what makes them special. It's different for every industry. But once you find what your top performers are built of, then doesn't it make sense to just find more people like that? So that's essentially what I do.
I
that's
like
sort of
I
how I
like
got
the
started.
grit. I like the grit scale. I like that. That's
Yeah,
cool.
and
That's
it
very
sort of
cool.
got it was really spearheaded when I read a book called Grit by
Mm-hmm.
Angela Duckworth, which essentially, in a nutshell, is West Point military, which is one of the hardest schools to get into in the world.
Mm-hmm.
They don't use traditional SAT scores. They use essentially a hybrid grit model that they've done themselves, because they've essentially, after tons of research and a lot more than I've done, were able to prove that the people that succeeded there didn't have the highest IQ or the highest SAT scores. They just didn't quit, and they were the most resilient. So when I read that, I was like, oh my God, this is like literally everything that I've thought and talked about in my life, but like personified in a book and like with actual backup data. And that really led me to creating this grit scale. And it's something I use honestly to this day, and I talk about it all the time.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
I love innovation like that. Have you ever read the book Talent is Overrated? Guy by the
No,
name of
but
Jeff
I feel like
Colvin.
I'd like that. I'm going to write it down here.
Yeah, it's a guy by the name of Jeff Colvin wrote it. We weren't um, hiring the best or the bright. That wasn't our model. I did a couple of different businesses, and I've never gone in and focused on I just need to hire the highest talent. It's very similar. It's a grit scale is a wonderful name for it. I want to see that what you got going on, but it's really just diving into the can do versus the will do. Right? I can
Yeah.
train the can do. Right? I can train that can do. The will do and the will to do is something that's completely different, and that's something that's really difficult to train. And
Wow.
but finding that fire and finding that teammate. So I love your work, man. That is
Yeah.
awesome. That is awesome.
There's two sayings that I really like, and it's not to be taken the wrong way, but you can't teach a dog to bark. You know what I mean? So they either have it or they don't.
Mhm.
And talent, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. So those are two things that I always tell people. It's not the most talented, like you said. You can teach technique. There's a million books. There's a million podcasts out there to teach you different techniques and discovery frameworks and sales methodologies, but the DNA that make up that person, you can't teach that, right? They either have it or they don't. So that's what I like to look for. And then I feel comfortable enough in my skills, abilities, and the teams behind me to teach that technique afterwards.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I have a partner, objective management group. They have this concept called sales DNA that is the closest I've seen numerically to get into that type of stuff. I mean, it's just, uh, I love the wavelength that you're on and keep doing the work you're doing. How do people find you? Like, so if they want to, they listen to this and they want to get in touch with Eric Larocque, how do they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple different ways. Probably the best one is I'm always on LinkedIn. I'm posting a lot. So for that, it's just linkedin.com/Eric Larocque, LAROCQUE. And then my company is called Cultivate Winning. Again, it's that whole model and premise of I like to win, and I want to cultivate winning for a lot of different organizations. So that could also be found at cultivatewinning.com. And between those two, I think they're covered.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And one of the things I got from your, like when we talked before as well, is like cultivate winning is about lifting everybody's boats, right? It's about lifting that team up. It's about building that team to get into a market, win together, rise up together. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
As we're closing, go ahead.
Just one thing I want to bring up. You sort of made a point earlier of you were in some, bad sales organizations, and then once you flipped to one, that one leader made such a difference that it transformed your entire career. And I've been through that as well, right? So I think that it often comes down to just one person making that impact on somebody else that can have these ripple effects on everyone else. So, and I think that's really cool. And that's kind of why what I do these days is I try to go into these organizations and sort of be that ripple effect, that I can affect these people. And hopefully in the future, they can take some of these things that I talk about and implement it for others so that we can have healthier sales organizations that are people centric and not just burning people down and beating them down.
I love it. And that's why you're on the Art and Science of Complex Sales. Our mission is to elevate the sales profession and help salespeople shine bright. So, Eric, thank you so much for being on. I appreciate you. Everybody reach out to Eric if you have any questions. Are you working with companies worldwide or just regionally?
Yeah, pretty much. Most of my clients now are in North America. So,
okay, North America.
I would say worldwide. Yeah.
Awesome. So, make sure if you're in North America and around, reach out to Eric, get some more, and definitely follow him on LinkedIn. Get some more of his background and some of the ideas he's posting. But Eric, thanks for being the real deal, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. You guys are awesome.
All right. Well, hey, everybody, from the Art and Science of Complex Sales, keep shining bright. Have an amazing day. We'll sign up for today. Make sure you're doing all the fun things, the liking, the subscribing, the sharing, getting the word out there. Our mission is to elevate the sales profession one episode at a time. We'll talk soon.